I'm a girl, and this story takes place my senior year of high school. It had taken me a minute to catch up on the whole driving thing, as I had failed both the permit and driving test each one time, so I had only had my license for about 9 months at the time. You know how that first year you have your license and a car, you're in that weird afterglow where you love driving everywhere? Yeah, that was my senior year of high school. I volunteered to drive my friends everywhere, loving the freedom I had of not having to conform to my parents' work schedules to hang out with my friends. My parents were extremely lax, so they didn't ask any questions and never really implemented a curfew. One random weekday in October, I was hanging out with a few friends from work later at night. I had volunteered to drive, which was typical of me at the time, so I picked up 2 of my coworkers and we hung out at the third's house. We all had school in the morning, so we called it a night around 11. None of us went to the same school, so it was about a half hour to drop everyone off as we lived in 3 different towns. The easiest way to get home after dropping off my last friends was to take a shortcut out through the sticks. During the day, the drive was beautiful with huge mansions that sat far off the road. However, at night, not so much. It was very, very dark, and since the houses sat so far off the road, they didn't provide any light for the street. It was still very early fall, so the tree foliage spilled out over the streets, giving it a canopy-like appearance. It looked eerie at night, with my headlights from my car illuminating the woods surrounding me. This was in the height of the clown sightings across the country, so I was more concerned about seeing one of them than about any real danger. I didn't particularly like driving down this road at night, but it only took about 10 minutes as opposed to taking the main roads littered with traffic lights. Possibly 3 or so miles into the road, a construction van turned onto the road I was on from a second country road. The van was very far in front of me, probably a football field distance. I had my high beams on naturally because this country road had no street lamps. As I came closer and closer to the van, I noticed they were traveling really slow, like barely moving. Then once I was only about a car length away, I noticed the van wasn't actually moving slow. It was just parked, in the middle of the dark country road, blocking me in. I am a pretty observant person. I've watched 1,000,001 horror movies. I immediately thought this was a lure of some sort. Maybe to get me out of my car, or I really don't know. I quickly made sure my doors were locked and turned off my high beams and regular lights. My plan was to just reverse a few miles before I was back on the main road. But before I even put the car in reverse, the van's brake lights turned off and started continuing down the road. I watched it pull away, hoping to let it gain some room between my car. It rounded a corner of the road, and once it was past my line of sight, I turned my beams back on and continued down the road. As soon as I rounded the corner, there the van was parked again. I actually yelped because I hadn't expected the van to be still so close. Do you ever round the corner in a hallway and someone's just right in front of you and it makes you jump a little? That's what it was like. Except I was a 17-year-old girl in a little sedan blocked on a dark country road by a stereotypical serial killer van. This time the van was more centered in the road, making it abundantly clear that I couldn't pass them. I began to feel panicked because now I was only 2 feet from the van's back bumper. If they were to jump out of the car and attack me, I would only have a few seconds to react. My little old sedan's locks were probably easily broken. I didn't want to look out my side windows, afraid of what I might see. I decided I would take scratching the side of my car over being murdered on the side of the road. I quickly tried to pull around the van, but it immediately jutted back in front of me, cutting me off. Now the van was diagonal across the road, with the front being used to cut me off. My driver's side was now level with the van's. If I were to look up and out of the windshield, I would see the face of whoever was doing this. I felt them staring at me like prey. I put my hood up, hoping the driver wouldn't see the fact that I was a girl. I didn't look up towards the driver and threw the car in reverse. Once I started pulling away from him, the van started driving away again. I watched as they drove away again. I know what you're thinking. Turn around and go the other way. I didn't have enough room to turn around quickly, and didn't want to take the time to do what would probably be a 10-point turn, which would leave me even more vulnerable to being blocked in. At this point, I was already 10 minutes into the woods and only about a mile or less from the main roads. I waited once again until the van was around another corner. I started inching forward, not wanting to stay still any longer. Before I even round the next curve, I see this freaking van trying to block me in again. This time the van was pulled onto the side of the road as if to let me pass. I waited before passing. I thought the van would try to run me off the road once I tried to pass it, or that it was one final setup for an ambush. I took probably 10 seconds thinking about what to do. This perv probably assumed I would slowly drive by to see what they look like and to ensure that I didn't scratch my car. So I did just the opposite of that. I gunned it past the van. To no avail. The van immediately pulled off the side and tried to run me off the road, but I sped past it too quickly. Instead, it rode my back bumper, less than a foot probably, and flashed its high beams at me non-stop. This crazy person was trying to blind me and run me off the road. This country road was a 25-mile-per-hour zone, but we were both easily going 60 plus. I could see the main road now and the cars driving on it. It was just a straight shot. The only thing separating me from this freak was one little traffic light. The van didn't slow down as we quickly approached the light. If I even slowed down 5 miles per hour, I'd be rear-ended. Once I noticed the van slowing, I stopped at the light. Instead of stopping behind me, the van pulled up right next to me. Keep in mind, this wasn't a 2-lane road, so this crazy person was parked in the lane for oncoming traffic just so he could be next to me. I laid on my horn at the light, hoping it would make it turn faster. As soon as the van overcame its inertia and could actually come to a complete stop, the driver's side door swung open. In a fraction of a second, I could see a man round the back of his van and approach my driver's side door. He was tall, probably around 6 feet and on the larger side. He probably had a $150 on me weight-wise. I screamed, not knowing what else to do. I turned back at the light, praying to every god I could think of that it would just turn green. The man reached for my driver's side door. I lurched the car forward, checking for oncoming traffic, and just blatantly ran the red light and pulled onto the main road. I was back in civilization. As I sped away, I watched for the man in my rearview mirror. He stayed waiting on that little country road. I always found it ironic he would be willing to terrorize me and do God knows what, but he wasn't willing to run a red light. For the next 30 minutes, I drove in circles around my town just to make sure I wasn't being followed. I called my brother before I arrived home and asked him to wait outside so I didn't have to walk up our driveway alone. He reluctantly obliged. I pulled into my driveway and was greeted by an annoyed brother. He walked me inside. Once inside, I started crying from pure relief. I couldn't even get the words out to my brother about what happened. Once I regained my composure, I just told my brother I had almost hit a deer. I knew if I said I had been almost kidnapped on a country road less than a mile from our home, my parents then definitely wouldn't have been so laxed about me driving anymore. I made sure to check the mailbox every day for a ticket from running that red light. About a month and a half later, I received it. For those who've never gotten a ticket for running a red light before, they send you a picture from the traffic cam of the incident. The picture captured me pulling onto the main road, but it also captured the man as he approached my car. With his right hand, he reached for my driver's side door, and with his left hand, he had what was clearly a weapon. It looked like a long stick, A baton, I think it's called. He was probably a split second away from smashing my driver's side window. Just goes to show how truly vulnerable we are as people. I could have played that situation just a little bit different and ended up dead in a ditch or raped or... I don't even want to think about it. This was easily the scariest incident of my life. I brought the traffic cam photo to my local police station and they told me they'd look into it. It's been a year and a half and I still haven't heard a follow-up from them. I doubt I will. But now whenever I go visit my friend that lives on the other side of the sticks, I don't mind taking the main roads even if it means waiting for a bunch of traffic lights. It cost me about $150 to pay off the ticket for running the red light. Best $150 I've ever spent. Just a little message before you hear this. I know what people are gonna say. It never happened. Fake. Not real, etc. I've had that my whole life because, let's face it, this story is too mad to be real. Sadly, it was very real. Feel free to believe it or not, but this stuff really does happen and there are some really sick people out there. Also, a lot of this is from what my mom and sisters told me as I was very young. I remember bits of it, but obviously at 5 or 6 your memory isn't fantastic. Also, the names have been changed for privacy reasons. So, when I was 5, my mom decided to leave my dad. She took me and my sister to a new house just outside our village. Our house was a row just off the country lanes. A row of 5 terraced houses. Behind them was a large orchard that hid a few rundown barns. It was a nice house, and from what I could remember, we had some good times there. After a couple months or so, we began to notice weird things happening. One day my mom, unemployed at the time, was cleaning the house and saw a man walking his dog around the houses. She took no notice until she noticed that he was doing this 5 times every day whilst looking at the house and through the windows. We began to joke about it and took little notice, as to us he was clearly a stay-at-home nosy guy. That was until one day my older sister Amy was out with her friends. They began to notice the guy was following them home. Scared, they began to walk faster and suddenly the guy goes into a full sprint, chasing them to our house. After that, it got worse. Our living room was right by the back door, and every night at 8 p.m. we'd hear creaking. It wasn't until one night my mom looked over and saw the handle to the back door slowly turning. Luckily enough, we locked it every time we shut it. We then began noticing the house wasn't as empty as we thought. You know when you come home and you just know the house has been empty all day and you're the only person there? Well, my mom and sisters came home and every day they knew they were not alone. Doors would often be left open. Things were moved. Our dog would be in a state and the neighbors complained that he was barking a lot. He was a scrappy little dog, a Jack Russell, but he was quite content when left alone. Due to there not being much evidence and nothing taken, for some reason my mom never called the police. I guess she just blamed my sisters and tried not to think about it. Denial is a bitch. One night, however, my mom was awoken in the night by something moving in her room. To clarify, her brother had died 3 years prior to this, and my mom's sense has been very spiritual, so she believed it was him watching over her. But she swears till this day that whatever was in that room she knew was bad. It wasn't her brother. Whether or not this was a guy, we do not know. But since then, my mom has been extra careful locking up the house and even told our neighbors to keep an eye on it. But it didn't help. On my 6th birthday, we had a party. Being a greedy kid, I ate too much and threw up, so my mom had to put me to bed. I shared a bunk with my other sister, Megan. I was on the bottom and she was on the top. I laid with my head on the door, Mom leaving it open so the hallway light came in as I was scared of the dark. From where I could see, the loft door sat on the ceiling of the hallway. Disoriented and ill, I woke up a bit and looked up. Looking back, it terrifies me, and the image stays in my mind forever. The guy was staring at me from the attic door. Thinking I was dreaming, I mentioned it to my mom. She played it off. That was until one day she was cleaning the house. After coming back upstairs to Hoover, she saw footsteps on the wall leading to the attic. She remembered what I said and asked her friend Susan to help her look up there. And what they found disturbed and scared us all. A filthy mattress was squished up in the corner of the attic. Newspaper clippings all over the floor with tins and bottles. The guy had been sleeping in our attic and coming down at night to watch us sleep and walk through our house. He had been pulling himself up into our attic, leaving footprints on the walls as he climbed up. Police were called, but not much could be done as we had no idea who this guy was. All we could remember was he was bald, skinny, gaunt, and fricking terrifying. If you've ever seen the film Creep, the one where she's stuck underground trying to escape this cannibal deformed guy, he was basically like that. One day me and my sisters and Susan's children Mike and Holly were walking through the orchard together. My mom was cleaning the windows. She cleaned a lot, as you can tell. She saw us and we waved over to her. Then suddenly she began pounding on the window, mouthing the words "run." We darted to the house scared and confused. It wasn't until I was 10 that my mom told me why she did that. When she was washing the windows, she saw a man crawling on his hands and knees towards us through the orchard. Apparently he was a tree away from me before we began running. God knows what would have happened if he had caught us. Well, this night we were about to find out. My sister Amy decided to have a sleepover with 2 friends, and Holly and Mike came over because he and my other sister Megan were friends. Me, Megan, and Mike were asleep. Mom was downstairs working, and my sister Amy and Holly and her friends were still up. My mom heard a tapping at the back window. Confused as our dog was in and it wasn't windy, we walked over. Opening the blinds, we saw him. He stood at the back door with a knife. My mom said there was a moment where they both looked at the back door. The first time my mom had forgotten to lock it. Luckily, as they both ran for it, he fell over the deck chairs. Mom gathered us all in the bedroom. Till this day, I remember the screaming and everyone running around. I remember thinking that the door won't hold. The house was nice, but old. My mom barricaded the door and then rang the police, then her friend Susan. Now, the police down our way are useless. For instance, Susan was the first to show up and she lived like a 6-minute drive away. So we let her in. My mom and her decided they had no time to wait as they got into groups. Susan takes me, Mike, and Megan in her car, and my mom takes Amy, Holly, and the girls in her car. We prepared. All stood at the door ready to run. Once out, we sprinted to our cars. Susan was parked across the road. As we buckled ourselves in, we heard screaming from my mom's car. My mom suddenly takes off and leaves. "Thanks, Mom." We followed after, confused. Our mom then told us that after she had gotten into the car, the girls began screaming. My mom turned towards the window and he stood there face against the window trying to break the car door. That was the last time I ever saw that house again. It didn't end there. But to cut a long story short, my mom went back to pack, and he was there. My mom's friend caught him in the car watching the house and called the police, who followed him to the gypsy site across the road from the orchard. Turns out he'd lived there all along. It wasn't until about 7 years ago my mom told me she heard he was caught with stacks of child pornography in his house and was arrested for the attempted kidnapping of an 8-year-old girl. Apparently him tormenting us for nearly 6 months wasn't enough warning sign, as no action was taken for that. We figured out that he must have been getting in the attic via the other houses, as they all shared an attic. So someone must have been leaving their window open, allowing him to climb through and into our attic. Luckily, we never had any more encounters once we moved away. I'm now 22 and living in a completely new town, and I've never seen or heard from him again. But every time I go home, we drive past that gypsy site, abandoned and run down, and it still sends chills up my spine. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. And for those of you that have the notification button hit, make sure you unhit it and then select it again, because I think something might have changed. But that should answer a lot of the comments I'm getting about why you're not getting notifications. That or YouTube's just being YouTube again. If you would like to help support the channel, make sure you look in the description for a link on Patreon. There's some really cool perks over there, and you can even come chat on Discord with us. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. I appreciate you checking out this video, and I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye. Since the age of 13, I've been a bounty hunter. I first got into the business after watching some Dog the Bounty Hunter on television. It seemed like something right up my alley, so I quickly trained myself and started to go catch criminals. I was told I couldn't legally get my bounty license until I was older, but I figured I'd take it upon myself and try to go fight crime. Sometimes doing the vigilante work is even better than people that do it by the books. So I keep a lookout on our local police website and try to find anyone that might suit my purposes. I was checking it out and I noticed this guy who looked pretty big. To me, he kinda looked like a teddy bear, and I figured this guy would be really easy to get as soon as I just walked in front of him and cried. You see, that's my secret weapon. I go up to the person and just start crying, and 9 times out of 10 they feel bad for me and they bend down to ask what's wrong. That's when I whip my taser out and tase them in the throat. They usually fall pretty quickly and make some pretty cool sounds, so after that the fight's usually out of them, so I just cuff them up and call the police. The police have told me many times to stop doing what I'm doing, but I love what I do. I'm helping people. So I do some searching around about this guy and I find out where he's located. I show up at the address and find out from his mother that he's at a park. So, photo in hand, I head down to the park to identify the man. I find him rather quickly sitting alone on a park bench, looking shady. I put his photo back in my pocket and pull out my taser while cupping it under my shirt. I walk up to the bench and I start crying. Within no time, he notices me and stands up to try to comfort me.
There, little guy. What's going on? How can I help you?
His voice takes me by surprise and I can't help but let out a giggle. For a man of his stature, his voice was not fitting.
Oh, I figured you'd laugh at my voice, little boy. I get that a lot. So tell me, what's wrong?
As he's reaching out for me, I realize that this is my opportunity. I rip my taser from under my shirt and jam it into his throat while pressing the button. Just as he grabs my arm. Now, I'm going to fill you all in on a little something. If you're not familiar with tasers or how electricity works, when someone's being electrocuted, you do not touch them, because that electricity can travel through them and into you. Well, with my special top-of-the-line 15 million volt taser that I custom built in my dad's garage, all that electricity traveled into the man. And as soon as he touched my arm, it traveled into me as well. Not only that, it clenched my muscles, so I was stuck holding the button down and he was stuck grabbing onto me. So we're both there getting fried to a crisp, non-stop, fried to a crisp. I can't move, but I can still think about everything that's going on. The first thing that hits me is the smell. It smells like someone lit up a barbecue, and my first thought is, damn, I'm hungry. Then I start hearing the popping and blistering. Both of our skins are starting to bubble from the extreme voltage that I put into this thing. It's at that time that I start to wonder about everything I've done. Why did I build this extra strong taser? Why am I at 13 years old in a park trying to catch criminals? Why did I tase him in the throat instead of the balls? These all fly through my head within a matter of a second. The next thing I know, we get smashed into by a golf cart, instantly separating us and stopping the electricity. I try to regain my composure and get to my feet, but the big old teddy bear with the funny voice beat me to his feet and says,
I don't go down that easy, punk.
And then he tackled me. Fortunately, the person who hit us in the golf cart had also called the police. That same person jumped on the back of this big bear and pulled him off of me. The police arrived shortly after and were able to subdue the man. As soon as they got him in handcuffs, I walked up to him and I said, "Not so big, are you now, boy?" And then I tased him in the balls and walked off like a badass into the sunset. It was that day I decided to retire from bounty hunting. There you go, everybody, another stupid story for you. Thank you for staying to the end, I appreciate it. Catch y'all next video.